What's up, humans, and welcome to a new Psicoactivo. It's a Wednesday. I wanted to do a video about this since last week. As you guys know, I'm a big admirer and follower of Jesse Michaels, who has a YouTube channel called American Alchemy. And you could say that arguably the case that he's been following the most is the potential of anti-gravity being a real thing and being discovered back in the 50s by us humans. In a recent documentary he made about J. Robert Oppenheimer, he talks about what I consider one of the fringest and most outrageous UFO conspiracies of all time. When he interviewed David Grush, Grush mentioned that Oppenheimer may have been a part of some of these crash retrieval operations. There are always rumors going around that Albert Einstein himself was also part of them. However, the National Archives of Australia have a document on their website, on the National Archives of Australia, that details a plan. It is a 1971 Australian Joint Intelligence document that regards UAP, anti-gravity, and both J. Robert Oppenheimer, who, as we know, is the father of the atomic bomb, and Dr. Edward Teller, who, as we know, is the father of the hydrogen bomb, a device that is at least 100 times more powerful than the atom bomb. In this document, there is like specific naming of these two scientists, along with F.J. Dyson of the Institute of Advanced Studies and J.A. Wheeler. Let me just read to you the summary of this document because it is extremely interesting. And I think this is where this major conspiracy originates from. In my view, this is essentially Project Manhattan 2.0. Because when the atom bomb was created, that was Project Manhattan. They split the atom and effectively they created new physics that completely changed the world. We know the effects are still ongoing right now. Countries that are at war keep threatening each other with nuclear power. But I happen to believe that the mainstream scientific community has no idea and doesn't really believe that any of this is real. But the fact that there is an official document from the Australian National Archives does give this a little bit of credence. Debunkers will come out and say that it is not true, that it is BS. But I gotta tell you something, guys. Many of these debunkers, they give a lot of credence to what the Department of Defense and AARO say about these topics, and they consider it gospel. So I don't think any of these debunkers who say the DoD said no, therefore it's not true, they don't have any real credibility because, as we know, AARO has been caught in some untruth from their side. So debunkers taking their side is not a good look, in my opinion. And I will keep repeating this for as long as I can, because that is the truth. You can be a skeptic or a debunker, but you need to have your own independent avenues to conduct your debunking work and in a credible manner, because I do have some respect for some debunkers. I think in a way, and in some topics, skeptics and debunkers do a decent job. The problem is there are debunkers who clearly have some kind of agenda and they are clearly aligned with the agencies and the organisms that have lied about many of these topics for generations. So that's what I got to say about that. I am going to read just the summary of this so you can see what I mean. Summary. The early analysis of UFO reports by United States Air Force intelligence indicated that real phenomena were being reported which had flight characteristics so far in advance of U.S. aircraft that only an extraterrestrial origin could be envisaged. A government agency, which later events indicated to be the CIA, Office of Scientific Intelligence, OSI, studied the UFO reports with the intention of determining the UFO propulsion methods. At the time, OSI was responsible for intelligence on foreign research and development in nuclear and missile matters. Number 2. The CIA became alarmed at the overloading of military communications during the mass sightings of 1952 and considered the possibility that the USSR may take advantage of such a situation. As a result, OSI, acting through the Robertson Panel meeting of mid-January 1953, persuaded the U.S. Air Force to use Project Blue Book as a means of publicly debunking UFOs, and at a later stage to allocate funds for the Avro Advanced Saucer aircraft and the launching of a crash program into anti-gravity power. To initiate such programs decades ahead of normal scientific development would indicate that the U.S. government acknowledged the existence of advanced aircraft, quote-unquote aircraft, which presumably use anti-gravity control method of propulsion. An additional motivation could have been the fear that the USSR would achieve this goal before the US. Number 3. By erecting a facade of ridicule, the US hoped to allay public alarm, reduce the possibility of the Soviet taking advantage of UFO mass sightings for either psychological or actual warfare purposes, and act as a cover for the real U.S. program of developing vehicles that emulate UFO performances. The Royal Australian Air Force, together with many other countries in the world, give credence only to the United States Air Force public facade and appear to have uncritically accepted the associated information. This information has been widely discredited by retiring U.S. service personnel formerly engaged in UFO investigations, as well as by scientists and private citizens. The conclusions of the Condon Report conflict with its own contents and has been discredited by many reputable scientists, including UFO scientific consultant for the United States Air Force. For now, this document is just like history in the archives, but the official quote-unquote history books and encyclopedias haven't caught up to this yet. Just keep that in mind. But also, this is where it gets really interesting. The number 16 and 17 points, I'm going to read them to you out loud. Number 16. The scientists involved in this effort included Teller from University of California, Oppenheimer and F.J. Dyson of the University of Advanced Studies, J.A. Wheeler and Richard Arnowitz of Princeton, Barclay Labadie of University of Indiana, who had worked with Einstein in Prague, and Stanley Desert. The objective was to control gravity. Control gravity. During 1955, the following firms entered into gravity and or electromagnetic programs. Glenn L. Martin Aviation Company, specifically Dr. B. Hearn from Göttingen University and Dr. P. Jordan from Hamburg University, Convair of San Diego, Bell Aircraft of Buffalo, Sikorsky Division, Lear Incorporated of Santa Monica, Clark Electronics of Palm Springs, California, and Sperry Gyroscope Division of Great Neck, Long Island, New York. Number 17. Such an intensive onslaught of the gravity enigma has been entirely irrational from the standpoint of conventional science and can only be rationalized within the context of a firm belief that UFOs were real and that the intelligences behind them knew how to control gravity. The drive to harness this power before the USSR could do so would be a strong incentive for the US government to fully support an anti-gravity program. By 1966, 46 separate projects of this nature were being financially supported, 33 of which were under the supervision of the US Air Force. Although details of most of these projects have been kept classified, it would appear that generally they have not been successful. Work on gravitational waves by J. Weber and his associates under USAF Cambridge Research Laboratory jurisdiction have been reported fairly extensively since 1966. Keep in mind, guys, this is from 1971. So, according to this document, anti-gravity hadn't been successfully cracked to their knowledge up until then. So, why am I talking to you guys about this? This came to mind essentially due to a very good debate that you guys need to go back and check on with all this information now in hand between mathematician Eric Weinstein and prominent scientist who has been linked to the UFO topic for decades and was part of the Stargate program, Dr. Hal Puthoff, who's a physicist. He's the one who has been writing papers supporting Dr. Miguel Alcubierre's warp drive hypothesis. And you can see the ontological shock setting in with Eric Weinstein as Dr. Hal Puthoff talked to him about the possibility that new physics has been hitting from mainstream science and mainstream academia. So, what do you guys think about this one? Let me show you the clip. It's right here.
You have to ask yourself, what Pandora's box would a new physical insight potentially open? The role of aerospace companies as holders of potentially basic scientific knowledge not shared with the academic world. Is it possible? It seems very wrong to me.
Maybe wrong, but it's true.
It is true. You believe it's true.
Yeah, I know it's true.
You know that there's physics knowledge held by aerospace companies that is not known?
There certainly is materials knowledge.
Materials, well, okay, material
which
science.
Which involves topological physics or whatever.
Okay. But fundamental physics as opposed to, condensed matter or...
Right. Certainly aerospace corporations have knowledge in the UAP area that specifically are sequestered against FOIA.
Oh,
because of proprietary labels, which the whole thing was set up to be that way, on purpose.
Right, but the idea that there would be fundamental physics knowledge that would be housed in an aerospace company and not shared with the physics community, there is no evidence of that.
No evidence for it, not that I know of.
And I wouldn't.
That doesn't mean it's not the case, but
that would be this crazy, egregious.
It would change our entire concept of who we are if somebody kept fundamental physics secret in the years since we became capable of exploding fusion devices. Right. I would grab a pitchfork and a tiki torch, and I would march on the National Science Foundation.
Yeah. I think what Weinstein is saying right there is what the majority of the scientific community who has not drank the whole Kool-Aid of a stagnated field of physics that has been like this for a long time, specifically according to Weinstein, because he talks about it, it's been stagnated due to the string theory hypothesis. during that Chapel Hill University conference where they were discussing anti-gravity as a real breakthrough. And I think that the fact that Weinstein is sounding the alarm here, that potentially new physics has been hidden from mainstream academia and mainstream science, could allude to the defense industry having this physics for decades and hiding it from the public for decades. So I know it is a crazy and wild conspiracy, especially when you throw in the names of Teller and Oppenheimer. None of this has been proven, none of this has been confirmed as real, but it is one of the most interesting and puzzling conspiracies out there. Because just think about it. Imagine that those crash retrievals are real and the US or the Air Force wanted to get real specialists there to investigate the crashes. Who would you call if you wanted someone who's like a real specialist? You would call the best of the best at the time. And the best of the time were Einstein, Oppenheimer, Teller, Dyson, all of those. And according to this document, they were involved in this. So I am not sure if this document is telling the truth, but it is from 1971. It is in the National Archives of Australia. And I think people should look at it in depth. So I am going to leave it in the description so you guys can check it out and let me know what you think about this. There's another video that I want to present to you guys of Dr. Hal Puthoff talking about an attempt that was made in the early 2000s to try and disclose something about this. And I think it is directly tied to all of this conspiracy, because a group of people who potentially knew about the secret back then were trying to get it out and they couldn't. Somebody stopped it. Rumor has it that Dick Cheney was the one who stopped it. I don't know if that's confirmed either. So we'll just keep this as a conspiracy that hasn't been confirmed. But there is documentation that is official that talks about this. So keep that in mind. Here's a clip of Hal Puthoff at Seoul Conference last year.
I was contacted by a CEO of a think tank in Washington, D.C. This is back a couple of decades ago. He says, I want you to come and participate in a conference here in Washington. I said, well, frankly, I'm too busy. What's it about? He says, I can't tell you what it's about. But if you come and you participate, you will consider it later to be one of the most important conferences you ever went to. Well, since I had respect for him and knew his background and many things he's done, I did finally decide to come to this conference. And when I arrived, there were about, 15, 20 people. I recognized some of them from the military, from CIA, DIA, some businessmen, and so on. So I thought, well, this is quite an interesting group of people. And so, to start the conference off, he said, this conference is about disclosing something to the American public. As a startup position, let's assume that there have been crash retrievals by Russia, China, and the United States. And the question is, can we bring this out to the public? And so I think I, and most of the people I knew, when you talked to them later, said, oh, this is really cool. I mean, this could really go someplace. So he said, okay, the strategy we're going to use is we're going to make a list of all the areas that you think would be affected by this. And then on each one, you're going to have to grade them on a scale from +9 to -9 as to the level of impact and whether it's positive or negative. Okay, so we started out by making lists. So we started out with the obvious things. Well, I mean, the stock market, maybe religions, well, certainly politics would be affected. So we made a long list. I mean, it was really a long list. And by the time we got down to the bottom of the list, we were really in the weeds. Like, okay, if corporation A has access to retrieve materials that corporation B doesn't, then when this comes out, corporation B is going to sue corporation A, they're going to sue the government. This is really going to be a tough thing to kind of handle. So, okay. So anyway, we broke up into groups, each taking a certain number of the things that were in our list. Okay. And in my group, we added up the numbers, +9 to -9, and we ended up in the negative category, even though we were kind of positively disposed to the idea. So I thought, well, maybe that just has to do with the particular list that we got. So then I talked to other people that were on other lists and said, you know, we came to a negative number also. Well, make a long story short, it turned out that everybody going through these lists, it was a very sophisticated situation with complex computers and big screens and all that kind of stuff. It finally came down to the fact that the problem was there's so many areas to handle, and there was no way to handle them all at the same time. And so the final result was, therefore, the leader said, we're going to recommend that we don't go forward with this. And so those of us who were participating in this were pretty disappointed, thinking, we started thinking that, this would be a good thing to do.
So, what do you think about this conspiracy? There's also another avenue that explores that potentially President Kennedy was asking about this back then, and he wanted to know about the programs and everything. And back at that time, there are those who believe that his assassination was potentially because of this. I don't know if I believe that. That is a little bit too fringe for what I am inclined to believe. There is no official documentation on that. There are documents that talk about this, but I don't know if they're official or not. These documents that mention Teller, Oppenheimer, and others, however, those are documented in the Australian National Archives. Again, not official either, but they are on an official website of the Australian government. So who wrote these documents and why were they investigating that? And all of these names of companies and prominent physicists talking about UFOs and anti-gravity. That is a deep rabbit hole, if you ask me. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think this document is telling the truth? Do you think this actually happened? Do you think it's not? What do you think about the potential involvement of Oppenheimer and Teller in the UFO topic and in anti-gravity research? Let me know in the comments. If you like the content you see, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell notification so you can get a notification of when a new video drops. And if you want to support the channel in any other way, I'm going to ask you to please look at the description and take your pick. There are many options. I have a big announcement of a new partnership I just signed that I'm going to be talking about over the next few days. So keep that in mind, and I will see you guys until the next video. Bye.